Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed podcast for episode 76. We're going to be talking about some of the latest videos that we've been working on. The AMD FineWine Video Situation. Was Steve misleading people with his videos? I say no, and I think Steve will say no as well. So we'll get into that and describe what's been going on there. We're going to talk a little bit about the GeForce RTX 5050 as well, and a few other things that we've been testing in regards to those sort of more mainstream entry-level products, a recap of some of the older models, the 60 class GPUs over time. So we'll be talking about all of that, and then obviously some of the interesting things happening in our lives. So let's get into it. Well, Steve, I guess we should update the fans on why we haven't done a podcast for the last couple of weeks, which is I've been sick, at least for the last week, which is why we didn't do one last week. Can't remember why we didn't do one the previous week. Maybe we were busy or something.
I think timing didn't work out. I had some deadline stuff and you couldn't do it early, if I recall. I think I said to you, we sort of have to film a day or so early, but you were out. I think it was something like that. Basically, it was a scheduling issue. We couldn't get together, which, it's a bit of a miracle we've able to set aside the 1 to 2 hours every Thursday or Friday for the most part without any problems, because there's a lot going on at the moment, and we're on school holidays at the moment, so I've had to kick the kids out for a bit because they've been gaming in the studio and stuff, so they can have an hour break. It is raining though today, so there's not much else to do. But anyway, we've had a bad run. Well, when I got back from Computex, Balin and I got a bad bout of COVID. That sort of smacked me for a couple of days and sidelined Balin for half a week or so. Then my family got that, so I was helping there as well, and that sucked. And then I had a short little holiday, which is when you released some of the pre-recorded podcasts. So that worked out okay. Mm-hmm. Then we got back from the holiday, and one day at school, one of my daughters got gastro. Apparently, it was going around the school the week prior when we were away, and she got hit with that straight away. So she was sick Monday night. Then I got it Tuesday afternoon. It was really bad as well. So I was pretty smashed for 24 hours and then fairly tender for about 3 days afterwards. But it only stopped me working for about the 24 hours. And after that, it was just uncomfortable, sore throat, sore neck, all that sort of stuff. It actually threw my neck out, which is annoying because I had just got into the gym as well. The new Hardware Unboxed gym's up and running. Balin and I've been loving that. And then, so anyway, and then we're busy the week after because I'm catching up on work and everything. And then you get sick. So it's been tough out here for the podcast. But look, that was season 1. We're coming into season 2 now. So we've had the break between seasons, and we're ready for season 2 of the Hardware Unboxed podcast. That's how we're spinning this.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, because we certainly haven't been keeping up with the regular schedule. So season 2 of the Hardware Unboxed podcast starts now. And you've been testing some things, so we'll be getting into a whole range of that. But it's winter here in Australia, so everyone gets smashed with stuff, and it's pretty normal. So my voice is still a little bit scratchy. If you're listening and you're like, Tim sounds a little weird, that's because, still recovering on that front. The rest of myself is feeling pretty fine. Just the throat is not 100% back to normal. So I want to start with your AMD FineWine video, because we probably would have talked about this more last week if we had done a podcast, but didn't. Obviously, the findings are very interesting and people have probably watched the video by now, but some people have tried to, I guess, debunk your video and sort of show that maybe the FineWine gains weren't necessarily all from the driver, maybe from some other things. So did you want to run through what's been happening there?
Where do we start with this one? So I guess I'll start from the very start. That's probably the best place to start. A German publication who I really respect and do excellent work, called PC Games Hardware, put out an article that was brought to my attention, I think on the Hardware Unboxed Discord. I saw it on a few other places. And they were claiming that the 9070 XT is now faster than when they first reviewed it. The FineWine. They were attributing it to drivers. And they showed a number of instances where the 9070 XT performance uplift when comparing their preview driver data, which is the day one review. You get a preview driver with the latest driver. And I thought that's really interesting, because I think you and I have talked a few times when you've said to me, is the 9070 XT data here correct? Because it's really close to the 5070 Ti now. And I sort of said to you, I've got to go and double check that. That does seem odd based on what we found originally. And so I retested everything, and I found that the 9070 XT was now pretty well on par with the 5070 Ti across a wide range of games. And then I saw this this post from PC Games Hardware. So that aligned with what I was seeing. I looked at their results, and they saw, for example, they saw a 13% increase for the 9070 XT in games such as Hunt Showdown, 1896, Space Marine 2. They saw really big gains like 24% in Forza Motorsport, 17% in Indiana Jones. That was with ray tracing enabled. They saw 23% in Half-Life with the ray traced version, and then 14% for Portal RTX. So some pretty good gains across the games there. Now, I think they tested about 16 or 18 games, the same as what I did, and the vast majority of games didn't overlap. So we both tested like Space Marine 2. I found a 10% uplift there. They found 13. So I'm essentially validating their findings there. But the point was, again, I translated their article from German, machine translation, and I pretty much understood what they were doing. They very clearly took their review data and made no changes to it. It was data that had already been published. They took that, and then they took the same games with the same settings, and they updated the drivers. Now, over the 4 months, you've obviously had Windows updates. You've had game updates, probably most critically, a few other things that can affect the results. But what they found was that the 9070 XT had become much faster in a lot of these titles in a short period of time. That's not something you always see. So again, very interesting findings. I thought, well, I've tested a lot of games they haven't. I'm going to do the same sort of thing because we've already sort of seen this. It answers a few of the questions you and I have had. So I took my review data and then I reran all of those tests. And again, I found pretty similar findings to them really in the few games that overlapped, and then some other games I found some good performance uplifts as well. So I thought that was really cool, and published the content I published. Now, the mistake I made, which is a similar mistake they made, not that I'm blaming them at all, this was just an assumption I made, that the improvements would be largely due to drivers, though I did note that there are other things such as game updates and that could affect some of the results. But it wasn't really what I was looking into. It was more just what I wanted to do was, because they only looked at the 9070 XT. So I thought, okay, that's good that you're seeing 17% better performance in Indiana Jones for the 9070 XT. That's good. But is the 5070 Ti also seeing around, 17, 18, 19% performance uplift as well? Because then it's really just the game's improved its performance, not necessarily that it's become, let's say, RDNA 4 optimized. Mm-hmm. So I thought I'll go one step further and do a bit of extra testing. I'll take the 5070 Ti as well as the 9070 XT, take that data from my day one review of the 9070 XT for both of those products. So we've got an apples to apples baseline, and then benchmark both of those products using the latest drivers on our up-to-date system and see how they scale. And we got some really interesting data doing that. And we found that overall, that the 5070 Ti has seen some performance improvements since the review, but not nearly to the degree that the 9070 XT has, which does support PC Games Hardware findings, even though they didn't test the 5070 Ti. So yeah, what they presented is pretty accurate. The 9070 XT has seen some solid performance up gains that weren't necessarily seen, at least to the same degree, by GeForce GPUs. So that's that. That's the basis of how I got to and produced the data that I did, and how I went about things and the story behind it. And to make it very clear, all the data in my content, and I believe PC Games Hardware's content, is accurate. And a few other people have since tested games like Space Marine 2, and they've seen similar, in a lot of instances, I've actually seen people posting better performance gains, more to the tune of around 20%. That's neither here nor there. The point is, I'm very confident the data is accurate. The mistake I made with that content, actually, we'll rewind just a second. I was quite happy with how I explained what was going on in the video. I thought I did that straight up. I thought it was very clearly done. I don't think I made any mistakes there. Straight away in the review, I said, today we're revisiting the Radeon RX 9070 XT to compare performance using the latest display drivers to data collected for our day one review. And I went on to say we're testing 16 games And yeah, so I think that's pretty clear. And then straight after the ad spot, the sponsor spot, I said, okay, so the test here is pretty basic. As I said, we're taking the 9070 XT and 5070 Ti and comparing the previously gathered review data to updated data using the latest drivers. So I have emphasized on drivers being the key chain in both of those sentences, so that's fair enough to say. But I've also very clearly communicated that we're taking our day one review data. So we're not simply doing a driver comparison today. We haven't just fired up the test system today, installed the old drivers, DDU'd those drivers, installed the new drivers, and compared that data. I think anyone with fairly basic comprehension skills will understand that, right? Is that clear to you, Tim?
That's how I thought. The way that you've described it to me is the way that I thought you had done it based on the review, based on at least watching that video, because there was a number of times when you're going through the data, especially the averages at the end and stuff, you were saying about, like this could be from drivers, or I largely expect this to be from drivers, but it could also be game updates or so
I did.
on.
Look, now I'm definitely to blame here for some of the misunderstandings, and I could have done better with some of it. And if I had my time again, I would certainly change a few things, mostly the wording. Again, I haven't got any concerns with the actual data. If you want to verify the data, you actually have to do the same test, believe it or not. We're seeing a lot of this. It's becoming quite annoying. This isn't the first instance of this. We saw it with, the ARC overhead issue. We were able to validate Hardware Canucks findings, and then we got a heap of people who don't know how to test an overhead, and they only tested GPU limited scenarios and claimed there wasn't one, and then called us out. That was very frustrating. Yep. We had the same overhead issue with NVIDIA. Remember in my words, I did an insane amount of testing to uncover what people were reporting. And then other people did a 10th of that testing and claimed it wasn't a thing. So that was frustrating. And we've seen other similar examples of that. So, but yeah, I just want to make it clear that I am to blame for some of this. And, I'll get into that. Because, I did say in one instance, again, this was an assumption on my behalf. I shouldn't have said it. I said, it looks like, or I can't remember the exact wording, but essentially I said we can solely attribute these gains to driver updates, which in hindsight doesn't look to be true. And again, look, I could have validated this myself by doing by testing the preview driver and the latest driver on a current system and seeing how much that changes performance. And if it might change for some games, but not some other games I found, that would have been clearer. And look, it's so easy to sit there in hindsight and say, hey, why didn't you do, an extra day or two of testing to work that out? The reason is it just hadn't occurred to me. It wasn't the goal of the content. The content was to take, the original data and compare it to the updated data. And I wasn't too fussed with how the gains came about. It was more just to see how the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT did compare and then how they compare today. And it can be difficult to work out over the 4-month period what's changed to come to those numbers. But again, if I had my time again, I would definitely do it differently. But I don't think the content's misleading. I think I explained what the test was very clearly. I just made the mistake of, it's a few little tweaks to the video. So the graphs where I said latest, I think I said preview or original drivers versus latest drivers. I should have just said review data versus latest data, and then when I talked about it, kept it more, I'm not exactly sure what's responsible for the changes here. It could be a number of factors. That's basically what I would change about that content if I had my time again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the goal of the content is to see, has there been any change, any improvement in the performance of the 9070 XT since you tested originally back in March? The testing of the drivers, let's take the games and OS that we have now, as you said, DDU the drivers, install both versions. That's more of a for science sort of test. It's kind of cool to see, okay, this is what the driver has done over that period of time, but that's not as realistic of a use case as what you've shown, which is the games tested, the OS tested as of March, whenever it was that you did the review, versus now July 2025? What gains have been made there? Because ultimately, driver gains can occur, but a lot of the time these days, the game is very important itself for the performance of a GPU. Parts of the game need to be optimized that cannot be, addressed by the driver. We're not in the DirectX 11 era anymore, where the driver does a significant part of the work. A lot of it is down to the game and improving it for specific architectures. So,
and my understanding, talking with the people from these companies that are in the know with this stuff, sometimes it can sort of go hand in hand. So they'll work with the developer will optimize certain aspects of the game to work better with this new architecture. But then the driver has to support that to a degree, or can support that to a degree, whether it's purely through making sure that those changes are now compatible and therefore there's no stability problems, things like that. So while it might not necessarily show up in initial benchmarking, and it can even be other aspects of the game as well. Like, it depends on where you're benchmarking in the game, how heavy certain loads are, whether it be CPU or GPU. So again, it's very complicated, and that's really why I shouldn't have made those assumptions, because really I do know better. I know that it can be extremely complicated and difficult to pinpoint down exactly where these gains are coming from and what's responsible. And a lot of the time it's multifaceted. There's various different things working together to generate those improvements.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can look in the credits of most major AAA games these days, and there will be, once you scroll through about 1,000 developers, you'll get to the part where there's credits of AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA employees, engineers who've worked on the game or contributed parts to the code to make them run on the respective GPUs and CPUs. So, yeah, that's a very big part of it. And yeah, so I think there's been even times when, it's been shown that, day one game ready drivers don't necessarily offer as many performance gains as you might think, as opposed to running it from the the pre-launch driver or whatever, that can make not as much of an impact. And then, yeah, as we've seen, there's been game updates that have been able to, without a driver update, address performance aspects on certain cards or fix bugs that only occur on certain GPUs. So, yeah, I think the way that you tested it to begin with makes the most sense from a consumer standpoint, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it is showing you the progression of the 9070 XT as a user would have experienced it. And yeah, sure, you could have labeled some of this stuff better and explained a few things differently. But I think, it's not misleading from the sense that if someone, let's say someone was going to buy a 9070 XT based on the video that you had shown just now, that you've shown a progression, it's now faster. That's not misleading someone into buying that GPU, because the data is accurate as of the testing being done now. So its comparison to the 5070 Ti is accurate. And then someone that had bought the 9070 XT and was interested, did I make the right purchase? Are things going well? Is AMD supporting my GPU well? The data has also shown that compared to the people that bought it day one to now, things have improved. So those are the two things I think the video took care of in a pretty good way. And yeah, I mean,
the performance definitely has improved. Again, PC games hardware, they're very good at what they do, and they've shown that the performance has improved, and I was able to verify their findings, funnily enough, by using the same method they used, and not a wrong, or not a completely different method, and then coming to the conclusion they messed up and did it wrong. And I've seen some people say, well, the 9070 XT in our original review was underperforming. It didn't perform as well as other reviewers, and that's nonsense. If you go and have a look at my 4K data, for example, the 9070 XT was 9% slower on average when compared to the 7900 XTX. And Tech Power Up, through a huge range of games, a lot of them different to what I tested, found 9% slower than the 7900 XTX at 4K. So that's pretty well in line. Again, I respect the work Tech Power Up do. And in that instance, we got very similar. We got the same margin. Often we get reasonably similar margins, even if it's within like 4%. We're talking about very similar data because we're testing a wide range of games. But in the case of Tech Power Up and Hardware Unboxed, the games list is actually very different. So I don't have any concerns with the original review data. I think we came to pretty similar conclusions to others. And again, it's not just me who's found this. I went and validated the results of someone else. like what we did with the ARC overhead thing, we credited Hardware Canucks as being the first to find that, and they copped a lot of backlash for that. And we went and validated their findings, and then other people weren't able to do quite the right testing. And I guess, again, I've admitted that I could have done a better job, and I wish I had have done a better job. And there's definitely some small things, and then the emphasis on the drivers that I could have done better. But what does really piss me off about this, and we're seeing more and more and more of this, is if you're going to validate somebody's work, you have to be doing the same thing. And there's really no excuse. It's pretty pathetic. There's no excuse for not understanding what the test was. If you watch the first few seconds of the video, I say exactly what we're doing. And then straight after the ad spot, I re-emphasize what it is we're doing. Like, it's crystal clear. So if you want to validate that, you can't just, it's really a much, I don't want to say it's a lazier approach, but it is a lazy understanding. You don't want to just take your test system down and go, okay, well, I'm going to install that driver and then that driver and see what's going on. When I've clearly said we're seeing the changes that have happened over the past 4 months by comparing the review data with the latest drivers. Now, you can say that's flawed testing. I don't like that method, whatever. I don't know why you would say that, but you can say that if you want. But you can't say you're validating our results or the results of PC Games hardware by doing what is effectively a completely different test. So that's extremely misleading. And I feel like, honestly, that's much worse than the mistakes I made in that video by emphasizing on the driver when really it was a number of things that led to those performance improvements. So I would just say, again, I could have done better, but that's what actually pisses me off about this. I feel like that's a much bigger mistake at claiming to be validating someone's work and then completely messing up the test method and perhaps missing the entire point of what it is you're responding to. Pretty lazy, pretty sloppy, I think. And look, people who have done that from different regions that don't necessarily speak English as a first language, pretty forgivable. The language barrier thing can be tough. And honestly, again, that's my mistake. I did emphasize the driver angle too much. So for a non-native speaker, pretty confusing. Didn't do the best job I could do there. But at the same time, I really appreciate the level-headed, intelligent people in this industry, guys like Daniel Owen, who they understood the objective. They got the mission. Like, I'd appreciate that. Daniel mentioned it in his latest video. People ask him to do the driver tests comparison, which others have done, and Daniel's like, but that's not what Hardware Unbox did. And he carefully explained it. And so I appreciate him understanding it and not trying to make a name for himself by trying to tear us down by doing what other people have done, which is honestly a sloppy reply and not understanding what the original test was. So big thanks to Daniel Owen. Shout out to him. He always does great work. We've said we appreciate what Daniel does. And really, we love the competition on the platform from guys like Daniel, because it helps validate stuff. Like we were able to validate, like I said, Hardware Canucks and PC Games hardware. When you find unusual things like that, it's good when someone can take the time to understand what it is you're doing and then replicate things correctly and come to the correct conclusions. So, good on Daniel.
Yeah, and if you do want to do a different sort of take on it, like the examination of the drivers on your system right now, I mean, you just don't say that it's a validation of someone else's test method that did things differently. I mean, making a video that way is perfectly valid, perfectly accurate, shows an interesting and alternate perspective to why the performance, like by doing that testing, you can actually add to the story by saying, well, there is this gain, but it's not actually all from the driver. It's probably more from game updates or whatever. You can do that without saying, I tried to test the exact same way and then just not doing that.
That's right. We've already done so much homework for you. PC Games Hardware had done homework for me, and I was able to apply that to my different range of games and then, again, validate and support their findings, which is beneficial for them. And then if someone was like, well, that's interesting, I'm going to add to that. I'm going to take my day one review data and see if I can validate what PC Games Hardware and Hardware Unbox found. And if I can, then I'm going to go a step further and, answer the question as to what is likely, responsible for these performance uplifts by doing like the driver comparison thing. So I think that's a much better way of going. Well, obviously, it's a much better way of going about it. So, and then one last thing on it that I'll talk about, Tim, is that people were saying it was misleading because we lent heavily into the fine wine thing, which, first of all, we didn't really lean heavily into the fine wine thing in the video, but they're saying it's clickbait on the thumbnail.
Oh, really? Okay.
The fine wine thing, first of all, is a bit of a meme.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's a bit of a meme. But they're saying fine wine means driver improvements, and now you're saying it's not necessarily driver improvements. And I admitted to the mistakes that I've already admitted to. I'm like, but hang on a minute. Fine wine is quite literally anything that sees Radeon GPUs improve in performance over whatever course of time. And historically, it's been largely attributed to AMD including more VRAM than NVIDIA. So parts like the RX 580 tend to age better than a GTX 1060 because it has an extra 2 gigabytes of VRAM. So that product becomes viable for a longer period of time, and therefore people say fine wine. It can also be driver updates. It can be SAM support. It can be a number of things. Whatever it is that sees the performance improve over time is fine wine. And so again, PC Games hardware, they showed fine wine. We showed it, but it's not like, I don't know what people think it is. It's really just a funny meme thing that has followed Radeon for a while, and we just lent into that for the title because the 9070 XT is now performing better, especially relative to the 5070 Ti, than it did in the day one reviews.
I think as well, fine wine back in the day, RX 480 and stuff, again, goes back to the games were just coded differently back then. The DirectX 11 era was very different in terms of the driver component and what the driver did. And so, it would have made more sense that a lot more titles would see improvements purely from driver improvements and also the VRAM thing that you were saying. Whereas today, you can improve performance again with DirectX 12 titles through driver updates, but more needs to be done in the games as well, which is why so many developers and the GPU manufacturers work so closely together.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move now to talking about the GeForce RTX 5050 because there's not heaps to say here. I think it's amusing that once again NVIDIA's decided to, I guess, push this out as silently as they possibly could, even less so than the 5060. I mean, they didn't try to push it out during a trade show, but we at least got briefed to some degree on the 5060. The 5050, they're just like, here it is.
Yeah, I think
it's coming late July. That wasn't even true. You could actually buy it from the 1st of July, whatever.
Yeah, I think I woke up one morning and I jumped straight into continuing some benchmarking I was doing the previous night. I think I'd been testing for about 2 or 3 hours, and then someone pinged me on the Harbour Unbox Discord, and they're like, "Oh, Steve, what do you think of the 5050?" Like, what? I had to actually go find the news announcement, catch up, get up to speed. I didn't even know it was a thing. So yeah, that one caught me by surprise for sure. I hadn't done any, but all I did was go straight to the test system and start testing. So I'd not looked at anything online. But yeah, it was meant to be available for purchase at the start of this month. So what was that, 10 days ago now? At least at the time of recording.
Yes. And I mean, there's been some, interesting things around this launch that I sort of saw. I think one of the GeForce PR people was sort of trying to explain why the desktop card uses GDDR6 memory while the laptop model...
I guess, is Ben a PR person? I guess.
I think he's the head of global marketing for GeForce, isn't he?
Yeah.
Let me have a look.
I meant more, he's not just a random PR person, I guess is more what I was meaning to say. He's the man. Ben is the man.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's fair. But I think he...
Yeah, that's more what I meant. He's the GeForce man.
Yeah, that's right. So I think he responded to a Hardware Canucks tweet. He said... this is why the laptop model has G7 memory, the desktop has G6. So obviously the chip supports both. He said the RTX 5050 notebook GPU has been optimized for the best power efficiency for portable laptops with great battery life. Therefore, G6 is the best choice for desktops, and the more power efficient G7 is the best choice for laptops, which is quite a funny statement because the last part does follow on from what he was saying previously. If you want the best power efficiency, G7's power efficient, therefore best choice for laptops. Doesn't really explain why G6 is the best choice for desktops.
Why doesn't a 5090 have G6 and if it's the best choice for desktops?
I don't know. It makes no sense. I mean, the obvious reason is cost. That's why they did it. It's cheaper. It's easier to access. So that's why they used it. But yeah, just a funny statement there, sort of added to the whole aura around this launch, I guess.
Yeah, a bit of an unnecessary tweet there from Ben. I think he's got jealous of the AMD employees sort of digging their I wasn't going to say grave, but digging a hole for themselves. So he's like, I've got to get on this and do the same thing. A guy called White Bear, he replied saying, but G7's faster, right? So wouldn't it make sense to have it on a desktop card as well? And then Ben decided to reply to him. And he said, in this case, benefits of G7 are for thermals and battery life, crucial for our OEM partners, and hopefully you'll see some great laptop options. Just, again, didn't even remotely answer the question. But yeah, a bit of a weird choice by Ben because really, we've seen, again, the AMD employees, we've seen this from in the past, and now, Ben from NVIDIA, they just shouldn't reply to this stuff. They shouldn't address it at all when there's no good answer. Like, there's no the truth is not good, or not favorable for them, and there's no good answer really, and there's no way to really spin this to have a good answer. So you just ignore it, because the reason why they don't do it is because they're looking to absolutely maximize the margins on a part like an RTX 5050. They don't care about the performance there really. It's a part they're going to mostly sell in OEMs or to system integrators rather, or they'll probably, yeah. So anyway, they're looking at selling them that way. It's not really a retail product they care too much about, so they're just trying to make it as crappy as possible, really, to maximize. Well, they're not looking to make it as crappy as possible, but if there's something they can cut margins on, they'll do it. And if that results in a crappier product, they don't really care. So in simple terms, the answer is money. Why does the desktop RTX 5050 have GDDR6 memory? It's because they can get away with it and it maximizes margins. So, and then with laptops, it sort of becomes a non-competitive part, right? Because, thermals and power efficiency and all that are crucial there. So they somewhat need to address that.
Yeah, that's right. There could be PCB things as well where, they want ease of OEM reuse of the same designs and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
that's always a consideration. So there's other considerations for those sorts of parts, but yeah, with the desktop part, and I think as you would have seen across most of the lineup, they're trying to make as much money as they possibly can on these models, and so one aspect they can cut down from a 5060 to save a bit of money is on memory, because the GPU die isn't that much smaller. You're talking about 181 square millimeters for the 5060 and 5060 Ti, which is sold for as much as $430, $380 for the 8 gig model. That's obviously a cut down version for the 5060, and then it's only 149 square millimeters for the 5050. So they've shaved off 30 square millimeters, not that much, and they're pricing that at $250 for the full die. So they're going to be looking for ways to keep the margins the same that they've had for the rest of the series. One way is to switch the memory type, save a bit of money there. I think your review really said it all on this part. There's not a lot to get excited about with this model. It's basically a slower version of 60 series cards they've produced previously. It is faster than the 3050, but this card's going to sell boatloads and not be very compelling or exciting, and it will be obsolete probably within a year or two. So goals achieved all around there.
Yeah, sadly, there are no redeeming qualities of this product, really. So the GDDR7 versus GDDR6 thing, if it had 28 gigabits per second GDDR7 like the 5060, it'd have 40% more memory bandwidth than it does. So whether or not it needs that, hard to say, but it doesn't. I think probably the only potential redeeming quality is the fact that it's the cheapest DLSS 4 GPU you can purchase, at least new. I don't think the 4060 really dropped below $300 ever, did it? At least I'm aware of.
No, not really. I haven't tracked the pricing for a while, but back when it was $290 maybe at best.
Certainly wouldn't have hit $250 US, which the RTX 5050 is technically listed at. Availability is still very sketchy. So I wasn't actually able to purchase one here in Australia. I was scouring the internet. I was speaking to all my retailer contacts. I was doing my best to get my hands on one as soon as possible so I could provide people with a review. And it was on the 4th I got mine, late afternoon as well. So it was pretty much the end of the day on the 4th where I was able to purchase one. So I got it last minute on the 4th, and yeah, got busy with my review that night. So a very weird release. Like, they quietly announced it, availability for the 1st, and then here in Australia, at least, we couldn't get it to the 4th, and it seemed like availability in the US was bad as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why there are very few reviews. Obviously, a big reason for that is the fact that there was no review program. I think that's probably first and foremost. But then the fact that you can't really buy it, that's a key component for being able to review a GPU that wasn't provided to you. And yeah, I ended up paying, I said $500 because the retailer suggested that's how much I'd have to pay around that. And it ended up being about $450, which is, yeah, essentially the same thing, close enough too. So 450 Australian dollars for that little plastic 50/50. Obviously, I'll be keeping it for future testing, but yeah, Sting's having to spend that much money on that kind of product. So not ideal. But yeah, not many redeeming qualities other than the DLSS 4 thing, which I don't think really makes it a viable option. Because with like a GTX 1650, you remember that product? It was 75 watts.
Yep.
And I remember how that went because the sample we got required a 6-pin PCIe power connector. So although you get 75 watts or thereabouts through the PCIe connector, it had an additional power input, so which is 150 watts if I recall correctly for 6-pin, and then 300 watts for 8-pin. So it had an additional 150 watt input because I guess a lot of them were overclocked, so they required a bit more power because the ones that didn't have power were slower. But with the 1650, all the review cards we got required power. So we're like, this thing sucks, there's no point. And then people were up in arms, but it's 75 watts. You can install it in those Dell systems that don't have PCIe power. And then we didn't get those models till months later, and they cost more and they were slower again. But at least, I guess, sure, super niche GTX 1650 was good for those that picked up those old Office PCs and you could whack it in there and turn it to a low-end gaming PC. But with the 5050, it's a 130 watt GPU, so that's never going to be an option. It will always require at least a 6-pin PCIe power input. There's one half height example from Gigabyte, but they also make a half height 5060, and that would just be a better product to get because it's better value because you know, it doesn't cost that much more, but it offers a reasonable increase in performance over, you know, that 1-to-1 ratio. So yeah, I got nothing for you on it.
And I guess we should clarify, right, that when you're talking about it supporting DLSS 4, you mean DLSS 4 multi-frame generation, which is actually the only feature that's exclusive to the 50 series, because you can go back and...
Yeah, I meant the cheapest new GPU, though, because there's not is there a cheaper GPU? DLSS 4 support, what does that go back to?
20 series? I mean, the 3056 gigabyte would have been... probably the cheapest, but I don't know whether you can get them anymore.
They were 350, weren't they?
The 3056
they were meant to be 250.
gigabyte was like 180, wasn't it?
No, I think the MSRP was 250.
That was the 8 gig model, though. I'm talking the 6 gigabyte model, the worst version.
Oh, I forgot about that abomination.
Yeah, you forgot about it because it's bad, right? So
that was released after, though, right? The official one was the 8. Yeah, okay.
The official one was the 3050 8 gigabyte, which was $250 US as well.
Yes, okay.
Right.
Yeah. But you could still say that that's a benefit because, you know, it's a new, you can't buy those GPUs anymore and they're obviously very slow. So if I had, like, I know I'm clutching at straws here, Tim, but I was like, if you could say one positive thing about the 5050, what would it be? That's all I've been able to come up with, is that it's the cheapest new GPU you can buy today that supports DLSS 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the cheapest new GPU that supports, for example, NVIDIA's video encoding or DisplayPort 2.1 maximum bandwidth, if you really wanted to use that for whatever reason. So, I mean, it's the cheapest entry point to those features. But yeah, like as a gaming GPU, it's not great. I mean, I've just looked at Newegg to see what the stock situation is. All the $250 models are out of stock. You can currently buy a Gigabyte gaming OC model for $270.
Ouch.
However, you can also buy a Newegg, as it turns out, an RTX 3060 12GB from MSI, brand new, $280 down to $260 with a $20 rebate. So essentially, that's like if you had to buy a card literally right now as we speak, you're hitting the buy button right now. Obviously, you would buy the 3060 12GB because it's a better product. So unless you really wanted multi-frame or frame generation, because I guess the 3060 doesn't support single frame generation, the 3060 is just a better gaming GPU. And so the fact that it's available at a similar price is not great. I mean, I imagine the 3060, that product, the MSI Ventus model, won't be available for that much longer. We're looking at probably run out deals, that sort of thing. And really, they're just trying to clear out that model. And eventually, you'll be stuck with the 5050 is the only option in that price range. But if it was faster or better, we wouldn't be having this discussion. It's basically a 60 class card from last 2 generations. In fact, it's not even as fast as that for similar-ish money. So not much more to say on it, really.
No. Nope, I don't have much more to say on it. So you actually reminded me of the video that will have gone out by the time this podcast goes out that you and I have both watched, because I made it and then I made you watch it, which was my RTX 60 series or 60 class video where we compared the 2060, 3060, 4060 and 5060.
Yep.
Basically, I imagine most people who listen to this podcast will have watched the video by now. And if you haven't, come on, go watch it. But in summary, across the 7-game average, because I did only test 7 games, which sounds like a pathetic amount of games to test, but I did so using 2 different quality settings at multiple resolutions and then multiple cards. So there was a fair bit of testing that went into it because of that. But at 1080p, using the low to medium quality settings, the RTX 3060 was on average 16% faster than the 2060. And then the 4060 was an additional 16% faster than the 3060. So pretty weak generational gains there, really. And then the 5060 ended up being 26% faster than the 4060. So that makes it the most impressive 60 series class GPU we've seen in the last 6 years, though technically not true because the underwhelming 3060 has sort of emerged as the more impressive card, despite being very unimpressive because it has that 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which in one real world example we saw enabled playable performance while the other cards were crippled. And I was really in that video trying to largely avoid the whole 8 gigabyte VRAM thing because I think for these cheaper low end cards, while I'm not happy with 8 gigabytes existing at all in 2025 on gaming GPUs, I think where you could, if you could give it a pass anywhere, it would be on these more affordable cards, right?
I mean, it's just the reality of the situation with entry-level buying at the moment. We can complain all we like, but if you only have about $300 to spend and that budget doesn't stretch any higher, then you get 8 gigabytes. And so it's worth comparing and assessing which of those cards is the best one.
Yep. So did you have any thoughts about that content at all, or it was pretty much like as you expected?
I mean, yeah, it's in some respects how I expected. I think there's been obvious dilution in the 60 class as well over time as we sort of made videos. I do believe the 4060 and 5060 are more like 50 class cards that we would have seen prior to those generations as NVIDIA's tried to shift the product stack, change the pricing. I think part of that you would have seen the video as well with when you compared cost per frame and specifically cost per frame after inflation, that there was some price correction over time. The RTX 3060 12 gigabyte launched at $330, and then a few years later, the 60 class is now $300, and inflation has gone up. So it has made the 60 class cheaper. However, they also kind of nerfed it by going backwards in the VRAM capacity from 12 to 8. And so I think in this product series, if we were sitting here with the 5060 the way that it is, yeah, it's better than some fairly underwhelming generations. But if it actually did have enough VRAM and it went from, say, 6 on the 2060 to 12 to 16 or something like that, you would have seen reasonable progression, especially when you factored in that sort of price jump that occurred or the value jump that occurred between the 3060 and 4060 with the changes in price and all that sort of thing. I think that would have made people feel a lot happier about the whole 60 class. It would have felt like you were getting more over time. And I still probably would have said that it was stagnating even under those circumstances, just based on some of those small performance gains that you showed. But I think overall, you would have been more happy with those sorts of entry-level cards,
Yep.
especially the 5060 with the more significant performance gain that it's shown. But the fact that they've sort of there's all this manipulation going on in that range to keep the costs low, to keep the margins high, to keep gamers wanting to upgrade regularly. Yeah, it just sort of made those cards a lot less good at the end of the day, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, 12 gigabytes of VRAM would sort of be the bare minimum, in my opinion, for that product. I think if the 5060 did have 12 gigabytes of VRAM, given the current circumstances, the way the industry is, I would have been quite positive about it. I would have been very happy with that product. Because you're talking about a B580 class product that's actually $250 and has much better driver support. So I think that would be a good product, something worth recommending. But with 8 gigabytes of VRAM, it's not going to be enough moving forward, I don't think. I think in a few years, it's just going to age very poorly. It's going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of testing in 2 years now, exposing how bad these 8 gigabyte cards released in 2025 actually were. But that's just a hunch, yet to be seen. We'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, it's so frustrating because I think the 5060, with what it offers when you keep things within that VRAM buffer or that VRAM capacity, is good. Is pretty good. Again, given current circumstances and given what we've seen, like as I just said, you got 16%, and you got 16%, and then you got 26%. So over the last 6 years, the 5060 has been the most impressive GPU in that sense. Now, if you start exceeding the VRAM buffer, then it's not great. But anyway, I was interested to see or hear what you thought about those inflation cost per frame comparisons, because obviously right now, as you and I chat, we actually don't know how that video went, how it was received by the audience, and what their thoughts and feelings were. So it's an unreleased video as we currently chat.
Yeah, I mean, I like the whole. I think it's definitely a better way of comparing over a longer period of time to use inflation data, because obviously if you go back to a 2060, which costs $350 or whatever the launch price was, that's $350 back then is very different to $350 today. And so you would expect over time that, things do increase in price. So if you're going and doing a comparison over that time span, you do need to use inflation adjusted numbers. I think if you're comparing one generation to the next, it's not as relevant because you're within a reasonable amount of time, you want to hopefully try and prevent a bit of price creep and that sort of thing. But yeah, like it's a good way of comparing it. And I think it even shows quite clearly with the scaling on some of those numbers what NVIDIA has done, because if they had kept the $350 price point up to with inflation, you're talking about now that being well over $400 for like the entry level card, which is again why I believe that they've effectively taken what used to be a 50 class product and made it a 60 class product, because they can no longer sell that GPU for, people would be very upset, more upset than they currently are if it was costing them $450 for a 60 class GPU. Because if you look at the market right now, what's the $450 GPU? It's the TI model now. So
that in a way that does seem reasonable enough. Like it's unsustainable to keep offering those performance increments, let's say, at a fixed price point. I think that is reasonable enough, but it's the VRAM thing for me that's the problem. Because again, it doesn't cost oodles of money to make sure that the GPUs are configured in a way that could make it a cost-effective 12 gigabyte card, for example.
I agree. I think another angle as well is that there used to be cards below this tier as well. And so it's always been the case throughout the history of especially NVIDIA GPUs that the cheapest model is always crap. It's always, designed for some pointless, well, there's not pointless use case, but you remember those cards that used to be just display outputs basically? They had no performance. Yep. So if we were talking about the GTX 1650, there was actually the GTX 1630 that was below the 1650, and then in between the in this video, you've compared the RTX 2060, but below that was the 1660 Ti, 1660 Super, the 1660, 1650 Super, 1650, and 1630. So there was, 6 GPUs there that were below that model.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's one.
Mm-hmm.
In the 10 series, there was all that, remember back in that day when you had to cover all this stuff about the 1050, 3 gigabyte, 2 gigabyte GT 1030 DDR4 model. There was actually a GT 1010 as well. There was the GTX 1066 and 3 gig models, a 1050 Ti. So that kind of changed the whole discussion point with these products. The products at the bottom end of the market were no longer just the trash. They were actually made to be somewhat compelling, mainstream options for people to buy. And then, if you only had, let me have a look. I'm looking at the 10 series now. The 1050 cost $110 for the 2 gigabyte model. That was its launch MSRP. The 1030 was $80. So it's just a completely different scenario now where if you're a gamer wanting to get into PCs and you don't have very much money, you're building, you're speccing up a system with your CPU, motherboard, all that. You have to slot something in. Hopefully you'll save up a bit more money. In the 10 series era, while it wouldn't have been a good purchase, you could have spent $80 on a 1030, kept it for a little bit, hopefully upgrade soon after that to something better. But you've got a PC for gaming, and it can probably play your basic multiplayer titles. Today, you either buy an APU or you have to spend a minimum of $250. And in that video on the 60 series, $300. So it's just a totally different scenario. And I think that's why we see more stagnation, more frustration from people, is because, the whole stack has been shifted. I think it's been also interesting to see that the 2 series would sort of align with larger gains in certain areas. The 3060 and now the 5060 have sort of corresponded with more competition down the low end of the market. Back with the 3060, when that came out, there was quite a lot of RDNA 2 GPUs. 6600 was very popular, 6600 XT. That's where AMD was most competitive. Now, obviously, as well, we've got the 9060 XT series, potentially a 9060 non-XT coming at some point. I imagine they'll release some sort of cut-down model at some point. And then you look back to like the 40 series, the 7600 was not a good product, not very competitive. And then the 20 series as well, you were talking about like 5600 XTs and stuff like that back then. So it just goes to show that, if there was genuinely more competition in this price class, that we probably would have seen better GPUs over time, more acceleration there. If the B580 was actually available at $250, might have changed a few things.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about our boring lives. All right, Steve, what's been happening out your way? It's been a couple of weeks. How's things going?
What has been happening? Well, Balin still hasn't got his car back. They've got all the parts now. It should be back in his hands next week. Definitely.
I've heard that like 20 times now.
Pretty confident at this point. I mean, that sounds crazy to say, but I guess, no, hopeful. I don't know. I don't know what to say, Tim, but he's been told from the shop they have everything now. All the parts have come in from Germany. They were waiting for like the headlining. Apparently that was really hard to get. So he should have his pride and joy back next week. So let's hope that happens for Balin. So that's the Balin news.
Nice.
But Balin's been enjoying life. We've got the Harbour Unbox gym up and running now. It's mostly done. I'd say it's 80 to 90% done. You can certainly do a lot of gym-related activity in there now. There's been some behind-the-scenes content for Harbour Unbox members where you can go see that.
Yeah, become a Patreon member. Let's do a quick plug. Become a Patreon member and you'll get access to the BTS videos. I think you've made 2 of them going through what this gym actually looks like. So that'll add some nice context to these podcast episodes where you've been talking about it.
Yeah, Balin and I can start doing some workout tutorials. That'd be amazing content. Actually, to be fair, Balin's very knowledgeable and very serious about his working out. So he's helping me. But anyway, it's going well. I'm enjoying it. So I had a bit of a problem with my shoulder. I've had that ongoing for 6 months. So I've been seeing a physio and stuff now. And with the cable machines, I've got a heap of exercises I can do. So I've been doing that and my shoulder's actually improving. I have sort of strained my neck a little bit, but physio's working on that, and it's just a minor setback. But probably not used to doing it. I did a lot of weightlifting and exercise and stuff when I used to play a lot of sport 20 years ago now, and since then I've just been doing a lot of mostly computer work. So now that I'm in my 40s, I thought I've got a bit of time now. I should probably start getting fit. So that's what the gym's about. And yeah, so far I'm enjoying it. I do feel better. I do feel like I've got more energy. So all positive stuff. So anyway, we'll keep doing that. And yeah, Balin did have a really expensive high-end gym at his house, but a few months ago he sold his house and he thought, well, there's no point spending tens of thousands of dollars rebuilding my home gym if I can just work out after work. So he saved all that money and he uses the Hardware Unboxed gym. So that's good. That's all going well. Enjoying that. I recently set up like the Bose surround speakers. They all work. I set up the TV for the sauna. So that all works. So you can now sit in the sauna and watch TV. So that's cool. And yeah, a few more things to go in there. But other than that, I've just been planning Zoe's new bedroom. So one of my two daughters, Zoe, who you've possibly seen on the Hardware Unboxed channel because I built her first computer with her on the channel quite a few years ago now. I made her a custom bedroom back when she was like a baby, that she used through to a toddler and up until just about now. But she's getting pretty big, and the bed I made for her wasn't super practical. So she it was a bit sad because she didn't want to see it go because I built it for her and she'd had it all her life, but we realized that she didn't have a desk and stuff. So I said, look, it's all right. We'll do a bedroom makeover. I'll build you a custom desk so you can do all your schoolwork and gaming and all that sort of stuff in there because she's allowed to have her computer in her room now. She used to be both of my daughters were in the kitchen, so my wife could monitor them using the computer and all that. But they're sort of moving on from that now that she's almost a teenager. So I thought it might be cool to do like a part 2 Zoe video, but it'll be less of her in it. It'll be more showing the bedroom. It's empty at the moment. I've got to do the skirting and all that stuff first, and then build the desk, build the bed. I'm going to 100% build everything, and then set up her computer and all that stuff. So she won't see any of that. I think I'm going to just build the whole thing because she's actually moved out of the room at the moment into our spare bedroom. And I said, once I start, we're basically going to lock the room and she can't look inside. And then when I finish the whole thing, we'll do like her seeing it for the first time and reveal that on camera. So that, I don't know what that'll be. Interesting, hopefully. Funny reaction, don't know. But yeah, we'll probably film that. So I'm hoping I can get that done in like a week, but it'll probably be like I'll do a couple of hours here, maybe a day there. I'm not sure how many days in total it will take to get it done because there will be a bit of work in the custom desk, custom shelves, custom bed. She wants. Anyway, I've got a rough plan for what she wants, and then I've got to go implement that. So I've done a bit of shopping. I took the trailer to Bunnings. Actually, really cool Bunnings story. In a place called Narre Warren, they've opened very recently a new Bunnings, like, I don't know what they call it, superstore, mega store. It is gigantic. You'll have to Google it and look it up, but think of the biggest Bunnings you've ever seen, and this thing just dwarfs it. It's massive. So the entire Bunnings warehouse is on a second story, and so you have to drive up like a ramp to get to the timber yard and stuff. Anyway, I had to go visit my grandma and help her out with her computer recently, so I went and did that. I took the trailer, and Zoe came with me, and we went to that giant Bunnings, and I loaded the trailer with everything I need to build her room. So I've got all the supplies now. I just need slightly decent weather because I have to do some of the welding and stuff, obviously outside. I'm going to weld up frames and then carry them in and install those. So that's really... I think that's pretty much everything. Stuff's going well at the moment, enjoying life. Gym's good, excited for Zoe's new room, and we've got loads of good testing coming up. So, yeah, all good on my end. Tim, what about you?
Well, apart from being sick, it's been the battle of the rabbits out here. So I'll give people an update on the whole rabbit situation. So I think last time I updated you, I was just sort of noticing how many rabbits there were and how I'm going to have to start getting rid of them.
Wascally wabbits. I remember that conversation.
Yeah, so since then I have fortified, I'll talk about this more like it's a war, I guess. I have fortified the fence line because it appeared that most of the rabbits were entering my yard from a neighbor's yard on one side.
Mm-hmm.
We had rabbit fences which are sort of like a chicken wire fence that's about waist height that's dug into the ground. Mm-hmm. But over time, ground moves and erodes and stuff. So sort of these fences, which were sort of scooped towards the neighbor's fence, or the neighbor's property had been sort of coming out of the ground. The rabbits could get under them. So I went through and basically staked the whole fence into the ground properly. So it's you basically can't get under it now. Put up some rocks and barricades and stuff through some of the tunnels that they'd sort of dug through that area. So that has stopped a lot of rabbit movement. But basically what happened from there is that effectively trapped the existing rabbits that were in my yard into the yard. And so they have gone round and started, just panicking and stuff and not being super happy. I found some rabbit warrens, which I've destroyed. So just destroying the entries, putting rocks, basically caving them in, putting a rock in front of it. So if they try to dig back in, there's a rock there instead of dirt, filling that in, all that sort of thing. They've been very sneaky and put some under bushes and shrubs and stuff that are quite hard to notice and get to. But I was going out at night and sort of seeing where they went when, sort of had a look. So now they're all just sort of in the yard, just, I guess, trying to find food and stuff. Unfortunately, they destroyed my apple tree. It turns out that at rabbits, when they run out of food, normal food sources will go for apple tree bark, because apple bark is quite a sweet bark. Apparently they can eat it. So I noticed that they have, like, it's gone. Like so I'm basically gonna have to rip that out and replant another apple tree in its place, which I will do, because it was a Granny Smith apple tree, which isn't the best eating apple. So at least it does give me an opportunity to replace it with a better variety of apple in the same spot. But obviously I'm very annoyed that the rabbits did that. They started to damage some of my other trees, so I had to put up some sort of shields around the base of the trees.
Yeah, tree guards, that sort of thing. I got some tips from people who said to use fly screen wire. So, like, indoors they've got fly screens indoors, which apparently isn't a thing in some countries, but it's basically a mesh that you would install when you open a window so that flies can't enter. They recommended wrapping that around the base of trees because it's flexible, sort of easy to apply. So I've done that. Obviously rabbits can't get through there, and that's worked. That's been good. From now, though, it gets into the more sort of sinister war plans that have to go on, because the recommendations at the moment for the season of rabbits, there's whole plans and stuff of what actions you should take at different times, because rabbits breed at different times of the year and stuff. Most of it is just destroying where they can live, making sure that they can't go there, because rabbits only travel certain distances from there. So you're trying to encourage them to leave and not have places to go. So that's done. But to actually rid the remaining rabbits, it now gets into, well, more aggressive stuff, let's say. And I think you talked about this a little bit when I was talking about poisoning in the last time I mentioned this. But it's just weird, some of the rules and restrictions, like the things that the government's like, you can do this. And as I mentioned last time, I'm obligated to deal with this invasive pest. In Australia, rabbits are not native. They destroy native wildlife and native trees and that sort of thing. So you have to take care of it. But then you look through the list of things you can do. And so poisoning, for example, we live in a sort of semi-urban area. So while I do have a 2-acre property, there are neighbors and stuff. I don't live on a farm. And so there's 2 types of approved poisons. One of them is this quote unquote more humane method, which kills the rabbits more quickly, but it also lasts in their system for longer. So if you kill a rabbit, but then let's say a neighbor's dog or cat eats the rabbit, like if the rabbit leaves my property into a neighbor's property, dies, their dog eats it, their dog could die. And so that's off the table. The other poison is described as inhumane, but it's still legal. You can still use it. It kills rabbits in like 2 weeks, which is really awful. I really don't want to be doing that. It sounds horrible. But then at the same time, you can happily destroy the rabbit warrens and trap them inside, and that's fine, apparently. You cannot let your dog deliberately chase or attack rabbits. That's apparently under the Animal Cruelty Act or something. You can't do that. So just to be clear here, I cannot get legally my dog to chase and kill rabbits. Like it can do that naturally, but I can't encourage it to do that. But I can poison the rabbits and let them die a horrible death over the course of 2 weeks. So apparently that's the case. Yeah, you think the most humane way to get them would be to try and trap them in rabbit traps, which are like a metal
Hmm.
cage that they go into. Like it's the same way you would trap any sort of possum or whatever, and then it would meet a lead bar over the head or steel, whatever your metal preference is, and that would be quick and efficient, and that would be the end of that.
Yes, that is
Um,
that is one of the options. There's obviously a lot of regulations around traps as well, though. There's certain
mhm,
types of traps that are banned because, again, of cruelty, which
mhm.
again doesn't make sense to me when you allow them to be poisoned over a long period of time.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the poison thing. Like that's
Yeah, I'm not going to do the poisoning. It
mhm,
doesn't sit right with me. The whole they just suffer for that long. It seems wrong to me. And like, yes, the rabbits are destroying like parts of my lawn and stuff. Ultimately, though, I don't actually have that many rabbits to deal with, and I can probably put them into a cage or something. You do have to check them and make sure that they're not, trapped in there for long periods of time. So that it's quite a
I guess
involved
you could
process.
trap them and take them to a vet, right? And they could deal with it via an
Yeah, there's
injection or
that.
something that would be instantaneous. That's probably the best way to do it, right? Rather than maul them over the head. I don't know. I haven't had to deal with this, so
Yeah, so I mean, like, yeah, you can do some things, obviously to kill them instantly, which is definitely preferable to some of the other methods. Obviously, in Australia, we don't have guns really. As a farmer,
Mhm,
you can own one, but it would be extremely dangerous for me to use one. You can buy like bows and arrows and stuff, but
mhm,
there's all sorts of things you have to do if you try and shoot them with an arrow. And
mhm,
so yeah, it's very complicated. It turns out it's not just as easy as I will put some poison down and they will die, or
mhm.
I'll do this and get rid of them. It's I've By doing the recommended steps, I've now effectively trapped them in my own yard. The reason for that being that my yard is sort of long, a long rectangle, and there's only now one entrance at the start, which is my driveway, and that is guarded by first they'd have to go through the dog zone, and then secondly through the cat zone, and then find that entrance to leave, which is it's not a sort of super simple process. You try chase them, they just go wherever. So
I'll tell you what you got to do. Get yourself some female cats, and then the cat zone becomes at least the 2 acre property.
mhm,
That's what we did. Remember we talked about this last time, and a heap of
yeah,
people commented saying they've got male cats, and they were like, totally agree with Steve. We've got male cats, and they're super useless. And people were like, I've
mhm,
got one female cat and a couple of male cats, and the female's the one that cleans up all the rodents while the males just lay around all day. And that was my understanding of cats. And so
mhm.
it seems to be verified. No one disagreed with it in the comments, so there you go, unanimous. But yeah, you have to get yourself a young female cat, and then just let
Mhm.
it roam the property. Unfortunately, the problem with cats though is it's far from a perfect solution because they will kill other native wildlife like birds and stuff. So
Mhm.
we keep our cats in at night, and a good portion of the day. They only go out for a couple of hours every day because they do like to chase the birds and stuff, which is frustrating.
Yeah, which is
So
good. My outdoor cat, who's a male cat, spends most of his time outside, does deal with the rodents, as I mentioned last time. As far as I'm aware, doesn't really go after the native birds.
mhm,
Obviously, I can't guarantee that, so there's a chance. And
mhm,
in our council area, we are allowed to have cats outside. Obviously, in
mhm.
some parts of the country, you can't because they do destroy native wildlife. So that's obviously something. But as well, on top of the whole female cat thing, you also have to get a cat that is trained to hunt. Cats that grow up or removed from their mothers before they're able to be taught how to hunt are practically useless, is my understanding.
I think
Um,
it comes down to like we've always got farm cats.
yes, that's a
So
good way of ensuring it.
cats that were generally bred on the farm, they usually like come from mothers that are in like hay sheds because
Hmm.
farmers put cats in hay sheds and feed them there to control the mice from eating all the hay and making a mess of that. So we got two young, well, we got them as little kittens. They were like, whatever the earliest age you can take them away. I'm going to say 2 weeks. No idea if that's true or not. It was something like that. Or, no, actually, I'm not going to say how long it was because I actually have no idea. They were little.
Hmm.
Um, whenever they can be safely taken away from the mother is when the farmer gave them to us, and they were fine. And now they're great. We've had them for 3 years, and they primarily clean up the rodents and stuff around the house, and they do an excellent job of that. So yeah, my recommendation would be get a farm cat. So look at because usually the farmers and stuff do have them. So you can contact local farmers and see if they've got a litter and get
What I
yourself
need
one.
is
The problem is though, sorry Tim, to cut you off, we had no idea what sex they were though when we got them, because I think you need a vet to tell early on or whatever. Anyway, the farmer was very experienced and he was pretty confident they were both females, but couldn't guarantee that, and it turns out they were both females. So
yeah, what would be ideal for me is, because I already have 3 cats. I have an outside cat and 2 indoor cats. All of them are male. Ideally, what I would need is to rent a cat, to have a cat, to like have a work cat come in for like 6 months, just bring him in. And then when he's done his job, I would just be like, thanks, I've got enough cats. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, that would be nice, except as a cat owner, I'm sure you know the number of problems that would be there problems that would arise with that. Because first of all, cats getting along with other cats and fitting into like a new neighborhood is a challenge. Mm-hmm. Cats aren't always the friendliest and most inviting of animals. And then second of all, they're not house cats and cats that are trained with that. They're not like a dog where you can just put it in a paddock or a backyard and say, yeah, do your dog business there. The cat will most likely just leave your property and try and find its way back to wherever it thinks is home base. And they're actually really good at doing that. They can travel many, 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 many kilometers to find their way home. But again, why am I even talking about this? I know very little about cats. So like I said last time, I'm far from a cat expert, but that's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, I mean, my dog does chase rabbits, but doesn't actively hunt them. So that's like the dog is, if he sees a rabbit and it's sort of run past his vision, the dog has a prey drive. It's going to go after it.
It's more of a game for dogs as well, a lot of the breeds.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the things I've sort of been doing a bit more of to try and keep the rabbits in certain areas is just get my dog to walk around the property a bit more. Usually the dog sort of stays closer to our house, but getting the dog, especially into the front yard as well, just getting it sent more around the yard to sort of, because apparently rabbits, if they smell their predators, they avoid those areas. And so getting the dog around sort of like the fruit tree area that I've got, certain areas where I'd rather the rabbits don't go, that has helped a little bit. And yeah, since I've been fixing up the fence and doing some of these things, the amount of rabbits has definitely gotten lower. I see them less. I see piles of fresh droppings and turds and stuff a lot less than before. But if I go out at night, I can still find them in the yard. So whether or not they will eventually starve because of winter conditions, which again is not the best way to get rid of them. Obviously that has an element of cruelty associated with it as well. It's not ideal, but if the rabbits did want to leave and find food in other places, it is possible for them to do so. So yeah. Anyway, it's just been just interesting to read up on, do the research into how to get rid of them, and then you discover all these things that are like, yeah, I really don't want to be doing things that I find sort of unethical or just nasty sort of ways to deal with things. Taking the simple route is probably better for me. So that's what I've sort of stuck with for now. I was almost going to buy a bow to shoot them, but then I thought I have to train how to do it properly and stuff. So that was out of the question. I was like, oh, could I make some BTS videos of me training to learn how to use a bow just for fun or something? But no, I think I'll probably steer clear of that. So that's the rabbit situation. I'll keep people updated on the rabbit wars as we enter breeding season and that sort of thing. We'll see whether the population changes. See where they try and dig some more warrens and that sort of stuff. But for now, it's sort of under control a little bit. Okay. A bit better than it was. So that's it.
Nice.
So that'll probably do it for this podcast episode. Thanks for people who've listened to the end, whether that's via the usual audio feeds or via our YouTube channel. We do have the Hardware Unboxed podcast bonus. Well, it's not a bonus feed, it's a supporter feed. If you're a Patreon member, you get the ad-free version. We occasionally put up some bonus stuff in there, the Q&As, the live streams that we do. Sometimes I forget to do that, so probably should get a bit better at doing that, but whatever. It's there available for people if you want, plus all the other benefits. If you become a Patreon member, probably get it just for like things like Discord, the BTS videos we were talking about. That's more of a reason to become a Patreon member. Aside from that, I think we'll be back next week to talk about other stuff. So unless some of us get sick randomly, we'll be back to the usual Friday programming as far as we can, keep it going. I'm going on holiday in August, so we'll take a bit of a pause then. But up until that point, we'll be doing podcasts. So thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next one.